Millionaire took his mistress to buy a crib. His pregnant wife bought the entire baby brand. They say a secret can unravel even the tightest of bonds. In this story, that secret is a simple crib. Purchase an errand so ordinary, yet laden with extraordinary betrayals. Daniel Harrington, a wealthy businessman with ties to celebrity circles, thought he could keep his double life in perfect balance. Little did he know a single shopping trip with his mistress would spark the ultimate backlash. His pregnant wife Sabrina, armed with determination and heartache, would respond in a way no one saw coming by buying the entire baby brand, brace yourselves, for a story of deceit, power plays, and karmic twists. Daniel Harrington was the kind of man who radiated confidence. Standing 6 feet tall with steely grey eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, he had always considered himself a self-made success story. Born in a modest home in Boston, Daniel built his empire from the ground up, beginning as an intern at a tech startup in his early 20s, and eventually starting his own software consulting company. His meteoric rise to wealth had been punctuated by headlines in local business magazines. Tech savant, Daniel Harrington, does it again. Fortune favors the bold. Daniel Harrington's startup explodes in value. In the well-heeled circles of New York City's Upper East Side, Daniel held a reputation that balanced professionalism with a hint of philanthropy. He had donated generously to local charities, including pediatric hospitals, to cultivate a polished public image. People knew him as a man who threw grand galas, invited Fortune 500 CEOs to his dinners, and once even attended an exclusive business conference hosted by Mark Cuban. Daniel was unstoppable. His personal life on the surface was just as impeccable. He had met Sabrina Lindstrom at a charity ball 5 years ago. Sabrina was the granddaughter of a Swedish real estate magnate, raised with both refinement and a keen sense of humility. She was a tall, elegant woman with warm brown eyes and an ever-present air of composure. Though her upbringing involved lavish estates in Stockholm and summer homes in Capri, Sabrina's heart was pure gold. She was known for her philanthropic work with children's hospitals, which had sparked Daniel's admiration from day one. They married at a chateau outside Paris, an event that made the society pages complete with fireworks over the Seine, and a guest list that included influential politicians and business icons. It was by all accounts a fairy tale union, and the press adored them. Sabrina, well-versed in public relations, handled Daniel's press engagements seamlessly, while Daniel continued to expand his ever-growing empire of tech solutions and digital ventures. In the earliest days of their marriage, Sabrina would watch her husband stand before a mirror in their penthouse suite overlooking Central Park and fix the collar of his suit. Daniel was ambitious, a trait she found both exhilarating and daunting. But Sabrina was no pushover. She was equally driven, albeit with a heart set on philanthropic endeavors rather than corporate boardrooms. For a while, it seemed like they complemented each other perfectly. The entrepreneur and the philanthropist, the power couple at the heart of New York's elite social scene. It was in their 3rd year of marriage that Sabrina became pregnant. The couple had struggled for nearly a year, consulting specialists and exploring fertility treatments. When Sabrina announced the positive test, Daniel beamed like a child on Christmas morning. The images from that day captured a side of him not often seen in board meetings, tender, emotional, and unmistakably invested in becoming a father. He brought Sabrina flowers every day for a week, and for a moment it seemed as though they were on track to be the perfect family. However, life in the spotlight can be heavy with temptation. Daniel traveled extensively for business, often out of the country for weeks at a time, sealing deals in Dubai, Singapore, and London. Occasionally, Sabrina joined him. More often she stayed home, busy with her charitable work, and now caring for herself during pregnancy. The physical distance began to carve an emotional gulf between them. Late-night calls turned into perfunctory check-ins. Text messages went unread for hours or days. Sabrina, exhausted by her pregnancy, found herself drifting into a lonely routine, while Daniel found comfort in the buzz of new ventures and gatherings of wealthy associates. On the fringes of his glamorous world, certain names started to float into casual conversation, particularly that of a beautiful socialite named Clarissa Morgan. Clarissa had recently made headlines for her involvement in a minor film project in Hollywood, and her image was frequently splashed across tabloids, with her raven black hair, emerald green eyes, and a figure that demanded attention. Clarissa was a sensational presence. Rumors had it she was single again after a messy breakup with an art dealer in London. Somehow her path crossed with Daniel's at a technology event in Silicon Valley, where she was a spokesperson for a startup focusing on AI-driven marketing. At first, Clarissa was just another face in Daniel's wide network, but as weeks turned to months, discreet sightings of them together began to emerge. A private plane flight to a conference in San Francisco, a late-night dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, just the two of them. The hush-hush chatter among the staff at Daniel's penthouse. Servants occasionally mentioned receiving phone calls from Ms. Morgan, though her name never appeared on any official appointment diaries or guest lists. For a man who had always prided himself on his self-control and devotion to Sabrina, it was a dangerous line to walk. Yet Daniel seemed unable or unwilling to resist Clarissa's allure. She was adventurous, spontaneous, and offered a thrill that tested the boundaries of his carefully cultivated image. If Sabrina represented stability and unwavering love, Clarissa symbolized excitement and the kind of spark Daniel feared he might be losing in his comfortable marriage. Like many men of power, Daniel believed he could keep both his wife and his mistress satisfied, carefully compartmentalizing each part of his life. But secrets like wildfires have a way of spreading, and once ignited, they can be nearly impossible to contain. The spark that would eventually set everything ablaze was ironically something as mundane as a baby crib, yet it was not the crib itself, but rather the circumstances surrounding its purchase that would bring Daniel's entire double life into peril and unleash a chain of events nobody could have predicted. Clarissa Morgan was the epitome of high society charm. She had a cutting wit, a knack for seduction, and the ability to read powerful men like an open book. She knew Daniel was married. Everyone in their circle did. But for Clarissa, the thrill of capturing a man who seemed otherwise unattainable was the ultimate sport. She played the game skillfully, never pushing Daniel too hard, always appearing a little out of reach and offering him glimpses into her world of glitz and spontaneity that made him feel alive. Daniel's attraction to Clarissa was both physical and psychological, where Sabrina was gentle and supportive. Clarissa was electric and demanding. She challenged him, fueled his ego, and sometimes, he would never say it aloud, made him feel more masculine than he had in a long time. His need for her became less about love and more about the rush, a drug to feed the emptiness he occasionally felt despite his success. Their affair began with clandestine dinners, hushed phone calls, and well-timed business trips. Initially, Daniel rationalized it. He was working hard supporting his pregnant wife, and if a bit of excitement on the side helped him cope with the constant pressure, what was the harm? He showered Clarissa with expensive gifts, jewelry from Tiffany's, a limited edition watch, and even a customized handbag with her initials. In return, Clarissa provided him an escape from the responsibilities that weighed heavily on his shoulders. Sabrina, meanwhile, was navigating the rocky waters of pregnancy alone. She was 4 months along, and while the morning sickness had finally begun to fade, the emotional turbulence was stronger than ever. Daniel's prolonged absences and distracted phone calls worried her. She reached out to her best friend, Marissa Faulkner, confiding that she felt something was off. Marissa, who was quick to jump to conclusions, insisted that Daniel might be straying an accusation Sabrina vehemently denied at first. But over time, the nagging doubts took root in Sabrina's mind. One evening, after calling Daniel repeatedly with no answer, Sabrina scrolled through social media. She came across a tagged photo of him, posted by a fellow entrepreneur at a rooftop lounge in San Francisco. Daniel looked happy, carefree, and suspiciously close to Clarissa Morgan. Although the angle was blurry and Clarissa's face was partially hidden, Sabrina recognized her from tabloids. Her heart sank, but she forced herself to remain calm. Perhaps it was an innocent encounter. Daniel often met colleagues and potential investors for late-night drinks. But the more Sabrina tried to rationalize, the more the doubt grew. She decided not to confront Daniel immediately, hoping to find concrete evidence or a clear sign that she was simply overreacting. For weeks, she kept her suspicions locked away, focusing on her prenatal health and philanthropic projects. She spent time visiting children in hospitals and organizing a charity art auction. During these visits, Sabrina couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to have her own child. The excitement of motherhood offered a temporary balm to her worries about Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel was drifting further into Clarissa's orbit. Their affair was now an open secret among the staff of Daniel's penthouse and his business associates, though no one dared to tell Sabrina directly. Clarissa herself had grown comfortable in her role. She had bragged to a close friend, the aspiring actress Jade Billings, that she had never felt more powerful than she did on Daniel's arm. She enjoyed the hushed deference of Daniel's employees, the way she could snap her fingers and have a private jet ready for a weekend getaway. It was an arrangement that suited her well. All the while, the tension in Daniel's life was escalating. His software consulting company had landed a massive contract with a government entity, which demanded more oversight and a squeaky clean image. He needed Sabrina by his side for public relations. She was the perfect partner for presenting a united front at press conferences and charity events, yet he also craved Clarissa, whose allure promised a break from the endless negotiations and corporate scrutiny. It became a precarious balancing act. Each time Sabrina asked about his whereabouts, Daniel concocted another half-truth. Each time Clarissa batted her eyelashes, he reminded himself that one slip-up could destroy everything. And yet, like a moth to a flame, he could not pull away. The turning point came during a conversation with an old friend, Henry Caldwell, who had known Daniel from their early days in Boston. Over dinner at an upscale Manhattan restaurant, Henry noticed Daniel's anxious demeanor. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Henry said. "Any trouble at home?" Daniel forced a laugh. "You worry too much?" "Henry, I'm just under pressure with these new deals." Henry. A savvy observer gave Daniel a skeptical glance. "You know I've got your back, but be careful. The higher you climb, the harder the fall if you slip." Henry's words reverberated in Daniel's mind. Still, Daniel assumed he could handle it. Men of power often share one common flaw. They think they are indestructible, immune to the normal moral consequences that bind everyone else. He had no idea that Sabrina was quietly gathering her own puzzle pieces, and that Clarissa's ambitions were slowly growing beyond just weekend getaways. Everything was inching toward a climax, and it was only a matter of time before the carefully spun web of lies collapsed under its own weight. A month later, Sabrina found herself in an ultrasound exam room, staring at the black and white image of a tiny life flickering on the screen. She was just over 20 weeks pregnant, and the baby's heartbeat sounded strong. Though she smiled at the technician, her heart felt heavy. Daniel had promised to be here. Instead, he texted her moments before the appointment, saying he had a critical meeting with a government representative about the new contract. Sabrina tried to focus on the miracle taking shape inside her. She listened to the steady thump-thump of her baby's heart and imagined the life that awaited them. Yet the absence of her husband cut into her joy like a cold blade. She politely thanked the doctor, collected the ultrasound pictures, and left the clinic with a mixture of love for her baby and growing resentment toward Daniel. Driving home, she recalled how Daniel once insisted on attending every appointment, every birthing class. But now, as success enveloped him, and possibly something else, his promises evaporated. Sabrina's frustration escalated into a quiet resolve. She needed to uncover the truth. The doubt and anxiety that had been gnawing at her demanded resolution. At home, Sabrina's first step was discreet. She checked phone records. While she couldn't intercept Daniel's private calls, she noticed a repeated number from Redwood City, California, that frequently appeared at odd hours. Suspecting it was Clarissa, Sabrina decided she wouldn't confront him directly about it yet. Instead, she spoke to a private investigator, a middle-aged woman named Alexis Cruz, recommended by a friend who had used her services in a similar situation. Alexis's approach was systematic and professional. She began following Daniel during his business trips, tailing him from hotels to restaurants. It didn't take long for Alexis to confirm Sabrina's suspicions. Daniel and Clarissa were photographed entering a penthouse suite at the Four Seasons in San Francisco. They were seen dining together, laughing intimately, and even making purchases at luxurious boutiques. The final straw was a series of photos showing Daniel and Clarissa stepping into a high-end baby store. Downtown, Clarissa's hand lingered on Daniel's arm, and the store clerk later reported they were looking at cribs and nursery decor. When Alexis presented the photos to Sabrina, her hands shook, and she felt a wave of nausea that wasn't just from the pregnancy. For a moment, she debated confronting Daniel with the evidence. The heartbreak was searing her husband. The father of her unborn child was brazenly shopping for nursery items with another woman. The betrayal cut deeper than she had imagined. But Sabrina was not just any woman scorned. She was a strategist in her own right. She recognized the scenario. Clarissa was trying to weave herself into Daniel's life on a level that overshadowed even Sabrina's pregnancy. Clarissa wanted to be significant enough to Daniel that he'd willingly walk into a baby store with her, a store that by all rights Sabrina should have been visiting with him. Sabrina's sorrow soon twisted into anger, and then into something like cold determination. I'm going to make sure he knows exactly who he married, Sabrina told Alexis. And when I'm finished, they'll both regret this. That very day, Sabrina set two major plans into motion. First, she devised a way to corner Daniel into revealing his own deceit, using the one thing he valued above all else, his reputation in high society and in the business world. Secondly, she contacted an investment broker friend, Melissa Chan, who specialized in acquiring businesses. Sabrina had an unconventional idea, something that, if executed correctly, would send a message not just to Daniel, but to everyone watching. As Sabrina kept her composure, Daniel remained oblivious at home. He noticed she was quieter, more distant, but assumed it was merely pregnancy hormones. He even felt a twinge of guilt. The baby was due in a few months, and he knew he should be more present. But Clarissa's demands were growing, and she had entangled herself in his emotional fabric. She was planning a lavish birthday bash in St. Bart's and insisted he join her, promising they'd keep it strictly off the radar. Torn between the guilt of leaving a pregnant Sabrina and the pull of Clarissa's invitation, Daniel vacillated. In the end, his fascination with Clarissa won out. He told Sabrina he had an urgent meeting with new investors in the Caribbean. The lie tasted bitter in his mouth, but he convinced himself it was necessary. This business was too big to pass up. He said Sabrina listened to his words without contradiction. She simply nodded and pretended to believe him. She had grown far beyond anger. Now she was in full strategic mode. Each of Daniel's lies became another brick in the foundation of her plan. Before he left, Sabrina set a small gift on his suitcase. A silver rattle for the baby. She forced a sweet smile. "Don't forget why we're here. Daniel, come back to me safe," she said, her voice controlled and steady. Daniel kissed her on the forehead, muttered something about missing her, and hurried out the door. Sabrina watched him go with a mix of sadness and anticipation, certain that the stage was now set. She had no intention of letting Daniel's betrayal remain hidden for long, and she was about to prove that heartbreak, when wielded by someone with intelligence and resources, could transform into a powerful catalyst for revenge. The baby store that Daniel and Clarissa visited in San Francisco was part of a small but prestigious chain known as Cradle and Crown. It catered to affluent parents, offering handcrafted cribs, silk bedding designer strollers, and custom nursery artwork. The flagship location featured private shopping suites, crystal chandeliers, and personal shoppers who fawned over high-profile clients. Sabrina first heard of Cradle and Crown when Alexis showed her the investigator's photographs. In one shot, Clarissa was perched on the edge of a display crib, her lips curved in a triumphant smile, while Daniel stood behind her, looking at brochures for premium nursery packages. Something about that image sparked Sabrina's fury. It wasn't enough that Daniel was cheating. He was also stepping into Sabrina's territory as an expectant mother tarnishing something sacred. Sabrina's unborn child deserved better than a father who would shop for cribs with a mistress. As weeks passed, Sabrina's pregnancy advanced into its 6th month, and she started making her moves in silence. Through Melissa Chan, she arranged discreet meetings with the Cradle and Crown brand's owners, an older couple named Howard and Bianca Stevenson. They were initially hesitant about selling, as Cradle and Crown was their life's work. However, Sabrina had a way of presenting her offer that was too tempting to refuse. She came prepared with detailed market analyses, expansion plans, and a promise to preserve the brand's artisanal essence. On top of that, she brought in personal stories of philanthropic initiatives that benefited families and children's health. Within weeks, the Stevensons agreed to the sale. The acquisition papers were signed in a private room at a luxury hotel in Manhattan. Sabrina insisted on absolute secrecy. No press releases, no public statements. The brand's name would remain unchanged, and from the outside, Cradle and Crown would look as if it had the same owners. But quietly, Sabrina became the majority shareholder and effective CEO. Daniel remained in the dark, busy with his government contracts and juggling. Clarissa's demands, he paid little attention to Sabrina's newfound hobby. If he noticed her frequent phone calls and meetings, he assumed they were related to her charity work or the occasional real estate investments Sabrina had dabbled in thanks to her Swedish family connections. He had no reason to suspect his wife had purchased an entire baby products brand, least of all the very one in which he and Clarissa had been picking out a crib. The day Daniel and Clarissa decided to finalize their crib purchase, Sabrina orchestrated a scenario that would unravel everything. Clarissa, feeling increasingly smug about her hold on Daniel, proposed they buy the most extravagant crib from Cradle and Crown. She wanted a statement piece, something that symbolized her place in Daniel's future. Although Daniel felt a twinge of guilt, he accompanied Clarissa to the store. What neither of them expected was the VIP treatment they received upon arrival. A store manager, fully aware of the recent change in ownership, offered them the private shopping suite. Lavish hors d'oeuvres, sparkling water, and soft music set the stage for what Clarissa assumed would be a romantic moment. She draped herself across the plush seating area, beckoning Daniel to her side. The manager offered them champagne, which Clarissa accepted, giggling about how it felt so decadent to shop for a crib this way. As they examined the custom crib designs, the manager discreetly left the room. Moments later, Sabrina walked in. She was elegant in a fitted maternity dress, her baby bump now undeniable. For a moment, Clarissa froze her eyes, darting from Sabrina to Daniel, the glass of champagne trembling in her hand. Daniel's face drained of color, his heart plunging into his stomach. Sabrina met his gaze, her expression devoid of the anger one might expect. Instead, she radiated a poised, almost regal calm. "I see you're making plans," Sabrina said, the slightest tremor betraying her controlled anger. "Funny, I thought we'd do this together." Clarissa attempted to regain her composure, crossing her legs and offering a small laugh. We were just looking," she stammered. Her bravado faltered under Sabrina's direct stare. Daniel attempted to speak, but words failed him. He had never seen Sabrina so composed, yet so chillingly determined. He tried to reach for her hand. She stepped back, shaking her head lightly. "Don't," she whispered. "You've said enough without words." Before Clarissa could conjure another excuse, Sabrina dropped the bombshell. "Whatever crib you two decide on will ultimately be your choice. After all, Cradle and Crown belongs to me now. Every piece of furniture, every design, every store location, it's all under my ownership." The shock in Daniel's eyes was palpable. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Clarissa stared, disbelief flickering across her face. Sabrina continued in a measured tone, explaining how she had quietly acquired the brand, the negotiations and the discreet signing. Her calm veneer cracked just slightly when she spoke of Daniel's betrayal. "You thought you could shop for a crib with another woman while I carried our child. Fine. But understand that you have no power here anymore." She looked at Clarissa, who seemed frozen to her seat, and added, "By all means, pick out whatever you like. But don't forget that every last dime of this purchase goes to my pocket and eventually to my child's future." The moment was as excruciating as it was cathartic. Clarissa finally found her voice, laced with indignation. "You can't just Sabrina cut her off. I can and I have. But you're free to go. No one is forcing you to stay, unable to withstand the tension." Clarissa stood, muttering a swift apology, and fled the suite in a flurry of embarrassment. Daniel, torn between shame and disbelief, tried to apologize, stammering about how he never intended for this to happen. Sabrina looked at him with an intensity that pinned him to the spot. "I'm not interested in what you intended," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "I'm interested in what you've done and what this means for our child." The store fell silent, except for the soft hum of the overhead lighting. When Sabrina finally turned to leave, Daniel could only stand there, powerless and paralyzed. He had never imagined a scenario where his transgressions would lead to such a dramatic power shift. The crippling realization of his mistake hung in the air, and for the first time in his life, Daniel Harrington felt the full weight of his own hubris. In the aftermath of that explosive confrontation, Daniel was left to grapple with the unraveling of his private life. Word traveled fast among the employees at Cradle and Crown, filtering out to the closed-lipped circles of Manhattan's elite. Within 48 hours, whispered rumors circulated at high-end cocktail parties. Did you hear Daniel Harrington's wife bought the entire baby brand and caught him there? With his mistress? Daniel tried to manage the fallout with the same PR tactics he used in business crises. He arranged a meeting with his publicist and legal team, hoping to keep the scandal contained. But damage control became almost impossible once tabloids got wind of the situation, fueled by an anonymous tip from someone presumably in Clarissa's circle. Daniel had once been the golden boy of the tech world, but now every headline was a variation of Millionaire's extravagant affair, exposed by pregnant wife's swift business move. Sabrina, meanwhile, refused to hide. She had spent years being a gracious partner, the philanthropic half of a power couple. Now she was the betrayed wife turned formidable entrepreneur. She received calls from news outlets wanting her statement, but she declined interviews, choosing instead to issue a short, dignified announcement. Cradle & Crown has been acquired with the intention of continuing its legacy of excellence. Any speculation regarding my personal life is just that speculation. My priority is, and always will be, the well-being of my family. The business world reacted with a mix of awe and caution. Some commended Sabrina for her savvy move and unwavering composure. Others whispered behind closed doors that this spelled doom for Daniel's once impeccable brand. Even government officials overseeing his new contract expressed concern about how personal scandals might reflect on Daniel's professional reliability. For Clarissa, the sudden exposure was humiliating. She retreated from the public eye, cancelling her upcoming birthday bash in St. Bart's and avoiding paparazzi who were desperate for a quote. She wrote Daniel a series of frantic text messages, oscillating between fury at being humiliated and pleas for him to protect her from the tabloid onslaught. Despite her glamorous aspirations, Clarissa despised being known merely as the other woman. She had aimed to ascend through social circles with Daniel by her side, but now her reputation was tarnished. Amid the chaos, Daniel had no choice but to confront Sabrina face to face. He found her in the nursery of their penthouse, studying color swatches for the walls. The place looked surprisingly spare. No crib, no baby decorations, nothing but painted samples and a few furniture catalogues. She was alone, a hand on her growing belly, lost in thought. When she glanced up, her expression was stoic, guarded by layers of hurt. "Can we talk?" Daniel asked quietly. Sabrina nodded but kept her distance. Her posture was rigid, as though bracing herself for impact. Daniel's voice trembled as he began. "I'm sorry. There's no excuse. I got caught up in something. I didn't know how to stop. I was stupid and selfish." He paused, searching her eyes for any flicker of forgiveness. "I know an apology isn't enough, but I am sorry." For a moment, Sabrina seemed on the verge of tears. Her voice, however, remained measured. "You humiliated me. In public, in private. Worst of all, you risked our family's future for a cheap thrill." He tried to approach, but she stepped back. "I understand if you hate me," he said, his own eyes moist. "I deserve it," Sabrina inhaled a shaky breath. "I don't hate you, but I don't know if I can trust you. Every time I close my eyes, I see you in that store with her. Do you know how that feels?" A tear finally slid down Daniel's cheek. He had spent his life avoiding vulnerability. Yet here he was, laid bare by his own actions. "I know I've ruined everything. Just tell me how I can make this right." Sabrina said nothing at first. She turned away, resting a hand on the near-empty crib catalogue. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear, her words decisive. "You can't make it right overnight. I'm not even sure if we can repair this at all, but I'm carrying our child, and he or she deserves a father who shows up. So for now, We navigate this carefully. You focus on the baby, and so will I. We'll see what happens." Daniel nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He knew this was the best he could hope for at the moment, a chance to stay in Sabrina's orbit, to prove himself, however slim that chance might be. In the days that followed, the tension in the penthouse was tangible. Daniel moved his belongings into the guest suite, an unspoken agreement that he would keep his distance until Sabrina decided otherwise. He spent his free time researching child development, attending prenatal classes alone, and consulting with marriage counselors. Meanwhile, Sabrina remained outwardly composed, but at night she wrestled with heartbreak and anger. She found fleeting comfort in feeling the baby's kicks, reminding her that amidst all the turmoil, a new life was on its way. And so the couple lived under one roof, barely speaking beyond what was necessary to coordinate doctors' appointments. Their once glamorous world was now a minefield of paparazzi business dilemmas and unresolved emotional wounds. Yet even in the darkest moments, Sabrina felt a strange sense of empowerment. She had taken control of her narrative, reclaiming a shred of dignity by outmaneuvering the mistress. If Daniel wanted to make amends, he would have to traverse a path of accountability and humility like never before. News of Daniel's affair and the subsequent baby brand buyout didn't vanish overnight. In fact, it gained traction, fueled by talk shows and tabloids eager to spin sensational theories. Was Sabrina's move a callous exercise of power? Would Daniel attempt to save face by stepping down from his company? Would Clarissa resurface in a tell-all interview? The scandal had real business ramifications. Stocks for Daniel's company. Harrington Tech Solutions wavered, reflecting a dip in investor confidence. Government officials scrutinized him more closely, hinting that any negative press might jeopardize the integrity of their contract. High-level partners, once eager to jump on board his ventures, became suddenly cautious. Despite the building pressure, Daniel refused to retreat entirely. He believed he could rectify the situation if he worked hard enough. Mornings found him in a whirlwind of crisis meetings with PR teams and attorneys. Afternoons were devoted to fulfilling obligations on the government contract, a Herculean task under the watchful eyes of potential critics. By evening, he returned to the penthouse, greeted by silence. Sabrina kept to her private quarters, interacting with him only for baby-related matters, or if mutual appearances were unavoidable. During one such evening, Daniel found Sabrina standing in the penthouse library, flipping through a family photo album. Pictures of their wedding in Paris, her in a billowing white gown, him looking dapper in a tailored suit, contrasted sharply with the reality they now faced. Daniel approached cautiously. "We looked happy." Then he ventured, breaking the silence. She closed the album and set it aside. "We were," she replied flatly. "But a lot has changed." A heavy pause lingered. Daniel wanted to say, he missed her, missed them, but the words felt hollow. Eventually, Sabrina excused herself, leaving the album behind like a testament to what they had lost. Daniel sank into a chair, staring at the photos in disbelief. How had he let everything slip away? He yearned to find a reset button to undo all the damage, yet he knew such magic did not exist. Meanwhile, Clarissa's life was in a tailspin of its own. She had lost her comfortable arrangement with Daniel and was inundated with media requests. Paparazzi tailed her every move, hoping to snap a photo or elicit a scandalous soundbite. The hush money Daniel's lawyers offered was substantial, but Clarissa had to measure it against the allure of selling her story to a celebrity magazine. In a twist of irony, Clarissa discovered that the moment she became the other woman, many of her high society friends distanced themselves to avoid guilt by association. Invitations dried up. Sponsors pulled out of her small film projects. She found herself more alone than ever, left with the realization that her glamorous world was built on precarious social ties. Simultaneously, Sabrina thrived in her new role at Cradle and Crown. As a majority shareholder, she initiated expansions that aligned with her philanthropic goals, implementing special lines for charities and pushing for partnerships with children's hospitals. She also used her connections to create exclusive, high-end collaborations with European designers. The brand's revenues grew steadily, and Sabrina funneled portions of the profits toward pediatric care initiatives and maternity health programs. Late one afternoon, Sabrina found herself in a meeting with Howard and Bianca Stevenson, former owners of Cradle and Crown, to discuss updates. Howard, a kindly grandfather figure, turned to Sabrina with gentle curiosity. "My dear, it seems you've invested a lot of heart into this venture," he said. "Is there a personal reason driving you beyond what everyone's saying in the tabloids?" Sabrina paused, her eyes flickering with a mix of hurt and determination. "My child," she said softly, "I want to build something that secures a bright future for him or her." And her voice caught for a moment. "I refuse to let that future be tainted by betrayal. Cradle and Crown is in a way my declaration that I'm stronger than that." Howard and Bianca exchanged empathetic glances. Bianca reached out and patted Sabrina's hand. "We believe in you, Sabrina. Whatever your reasons, the brand is in good hands." At home, Sabrina's growing success only magnified the chasm between her and Daniel. He struggled to reconcile the wife he once knew, soft-spoken philanthropic content, to remain in the background with this formidable new force who commanded boardrooms and overshadowed his power moves. On more than one occasion, Daniel's business peers commented on Sabrina's brilliance, some even joking that she was the real Harrington star nowadays. As painful as it was for Daniel, a part of him swelled with pride at her achievements. If only he could share in that pride without the lingering ghost of his betrayal. In fleeting moments, Sabrina allowed a glimpse of her emotional turmoil to surface. She would cradle her baby bump at night, tears wetting her pillow as she felt the baby move. Sometimes she questioned if she was doing the right thing by keeping Daniel at arm's length, especially now that they would soon become parents. Other times, she resolved that her boundaries were necessary for her own dignity. Daniel had to earn his place again, if that was even possible. And so the household existed in a fragile equilibrium, neither fully together nor entirely broken. With each passing day, the weight of consequences bore down on them all. Sabrina used her entrepreneurial success to cope, while Daniel confronted the wreckage of his once untouchable reputation. Their future remained uncertain, tethered by the life growing within Sabrina. A silent question lingered in every interaction. Could love and trust ever be restored after such a public betrayal? Or would their story become a cautionary tale for anyone who believed power could shield them from moral reckoning? A tipping point arrived 3 weeks before Sabrina's due date. Daniel's business was already wobbling, but a leaked government audit report sent everything into a downward spiral. Although the audit found no direct evidence of fraud, it raised questions about Daniel's leadership amid personal scandals. Investors panicked, and Harrington Tech Solutions stock value plummeted nearly 20% overnight. Daniel spent hours in emergency board meetings, phone pressed to his ear as he negotiated with panicked shareholders. By the time he returned to the penthouse late that evening, he was greeted by an unexpected sight. Sabrina seated on the couch, hands folded over her baby bump eyes, blazing with determination. "I'm calling a family council," she said. Her voice held a quiet authority that left no room for debate. Family council was a concept they had picked up from one of Sabrina's Swedish relatives, a tradition where the family gathered to address crises in a structured manner. Daniel was too exhausted to argue. He slumped onto the armchair across from her, bracing himself for whatever was coming. Sabrina began. "You've brought us to the brink. Your reputation is in tatters, and now your company is suffering too. This impacts our child's future, and I won't stand by and let it ruin everything." Daniel's voice was hollow. "I know I'm trying to fix it. The board wants me to step down temporarily to show good faith." She studied him for a moment, perhaps gauging how sincere he was. "Do you think that's the right move?" He exhaled shakily. "Yes. If I step down, maybe the company can stabilize. Maybe the contract won't be in jeopardy. But part of me feels like I'm failing, like I built this empire, and now I'm letting it slip away." Sabrina pressed her lips together. "You let something else slip away, long before this, our marriage, your integrity. Now you're dealing with the consequences." Daniel winced. Her words stung, but they were true. He closed his eyes briefly, summoning the courage to speak. "Sabrina, I know you have every reason to hate me, but I still love you. I'm sorry that my actions have caused you so much pain. I want to do right by you and our child. I'll do anything." She looked at him, sadness mingling with anger. "Love isn't a magic word that fixes everything, Daniel. We have to decide what kind of parents we want to be. Our child deserves honesty, stability, and respect. Right now, we're falling short on all counts. He couldn't meet her gaze." "So what do we do?" Sabrina inhaled, drawing strength from the life inside her. "You step down from the company. Do what's necessary to salvage your reputation. You get therapy counseling. Whatever it takes to prove to me that you can be trusted again. In the meantime, I'm focusing on Cradle and Crown and preparing for this baby. If we're going to co-parent, we need to be on the same page." Her ultimatum hovered in the air. Daniel nodded, tears threatening to escape. He whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for at least giving me a path forward." That night, Daniel formally announced his temporary resignation to the board, citing personal reasons. The news sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Some critics crowed that Daniel's downfall was inevitable, while others admired his willingness to step back to address his personal issues. Clarissa, who had been in sporadic contact, saw this as an opportunity to gain his ear. She left him a voicemail. "I know you're going through a lot. Please let me be there for you. You matter to me." But Daniel did not reply. In the midst of chaos, he realized with stark clarity that Clarissa offered no solace, only a reminder of his worst mistakes. For the first time in months, Daniel tried to find genuine redemption. He started attending individual therapy sessions to confront the deeper reasons behind his affair. His fear of losing excitement, the sense of entitlement that came with success, the craving for an ego boost. He also booked appointments with a couples therapist, though Sabrina was hesitant to attend. She was not sure if she wanted to salvage the marriage or simply manage an amicable co-parenting relationship. Still, for the baby's sake, she agreed to try at least a few sessions. As Sabrina's due date approached, she experienced increased fatigue and anxiety. Publicly, she remained the poised entrepreneur, unveiling a new charity partnership with Cradle and Crown that provided free bassinets to financially struggling single mothers. Privately, she wrestled with questions of whether she should allow Daniel into the delivery room. She hated him for what he did, but she also understood that he was the baby's father. In the last therapy session before her due date, Sabrina voiced her deepest fears. What if I can't ever trust him again? What if the baby grows up sensing that tension, that resentment? The therapist offered gentle insights, explaining that healing was a process requiring time, remorse, and genuine change from Daniel. Ultimately, only Sabrina could decide if she was willing to see who Daniel became in his pursuit of redemption. That night, Daniel approached Sabrina in the hallway outside her bedroom. His eyes brimmed with remorse. "I know I've lost the right to expect your forgiveness," he said, "but I want to be there for the birth. Please let me be a father from day one." Sabrina's expression softened slightly. "I'll think about it," she replied gently, rubbing her belly as if seeking counsel from the life inside her. There was no immediate yes or no, only a fragile promise to consider his request. And so, on the cusp of new life, they hovered between heartbreak and hope. The tension in the penthouse remained taut, but now it held a faint glimmer of possibility. Beneath the aftermath of Daniel's crash lay the first signs of an awakening, a realization that if they were to move forward, they would have to confront their worst selves and perhaps discover their better ones in the process. The day arrived in a swirl of nerves and anticipation. Sabrina woke up before dawn with mild contractions. Initially, she tried to manage them alone, pacing around her bedroom, but by morning, the pains intensified. She called out for Daniel, who rushed to her side. For the first time in months, their eyes met with a shared urgency that eclipsed their personal tensions. The baby was coming. They arrived at the hospital in a flurry of medical protocols and forms. Sabrina was whisked into a private suite, courtesy of the hospital wing she and Daniel had donated to in earlier, happier times. Nurses checked her vitals, monitored the baby, and administered pain relief. Throughout it all, Daniel was there, holding her hand, fetching ice chips, whispering reassurances. Despite her lingering resentment, Sabrina found herself oddly comforted by his presence. He was still the father of her child, after all. Hours passed. Contractions ebbed and flowed, and medical staff prepared for delivery. In a brief lull, Sabrina looked at Daniel, sweat dotting her brow. "I'm allowing you here because of the baby," she said, through clenched teeth, struggling against a fresh wave of pain. "Don't take it as a sign that I've forgiven you." He nodded solemnly, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. "I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance." When it was finally time to push, Sabrina dug deep into her reserves of strength. Her emotions soared between exhilaration and fear. Through the haze of pain and elation, she felt Daniel's supportive grip on her arm. She heard the frantic encouragement of nurses and doctors, felt the swirl of adrenaline as the baby crowned. Then a single sharp cry pierced the air. A wave of relief washed over Sabrina as the doctor lifted a tiny wriggling form into view. A baby girl, pink and perfect, her cries announcing her arrival with unabashed vigor. Sabrina burst into tears, overwhelmed by the miracle of new life. Beside her, Daniel stared at his daughter in awe, tears streaming freely down his face. "You have a baby girl," the doctor announced, placing the infant on Sabrina's chest for skin-to-skin contact. Sabrina felt her heart swell with a love so powerful, it momentarily blotted out every betrayal. She held her daughter close, marveling at the tiny fingers, the soft tufts of hair, the way the baby's squinted eyes struggled to adjust to the bright world. Daniel leaned in his voice, trembling as he said, "She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect." Gently, he brushed his daughter's cheek with his fingertip, a profound reverence in his gaze. For a fleeting moment, he and Sabrina were united in pure, unadulterated joy. In the hours following the birth, mother and child were monitored closely. Sabrina's exhaustion finally gave way to a wave of sleep. Daniel cradled the baby in his arms, promising her a better man than he had been. He whispered apologies. She wouldn't understand vows he hoped he could keep. Time stood still in that quiet moment, father and daughter illuminated by the hospital room's soft overhead light. When Sabrina woke later, she found Daniel seated in a chair, the baby swaddled securely against his chest. She watched them for a moment, her emotions churning. He looked like a man reborn. Tears dried on his cheeks, eyes wide with wonder. But the memory of his betrayal still lingered like a scar. She couldn't simply pretend it never happened. Daniel sensed her gaze and looked up. "Do you want to hold her?" he asked softly. Sabrina nodded, and Daniel carefully transferred the baby into her arms. Their daughter yawned, tiny lips pursing in a content expression. Sabrina's heart clenched with a fierce, protective love, not just for the baby, but for the future. She wanted to protect Daniel. She began quietly. "This changes things. Not us, necessarily, but my priorities. Our daughter comes first above everything. I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I did before, but I won't deny her a father. If you want to be in her life, prove it. Show up for her. Be the man she deserves." He bowed his head, tears threatening to spill again. "I will, whatever it takes." Over the next few days, Sabrina remained in the hospital for observation, experiencing the normal bouts of postpartum vulnerability. Nurses taught her techniques for feeding and swaddling, and Daniel took copious notes, determined to be a hands-on father. There were awkward silences between them, remnants of distrust and unspoken hurt, yet there was also a glimmer of something new, a tentative hope that maybe through their daughter they could forge a different path. When Sabrina was discharged, they returned to the penthouse, now carefully reconfigured, with a nursery filled with cradle and crown pieces Sabrina had personally selected, no vestige of Clarissa's involvement in sight. The baby's name, Charlotte, was embroidered on a plush blanket. As Sabrina laid Charlotte in her crib for the first time, Daniel hovered protectively, ensuring she was comfortable. Sabrina glanced at him, recalling the day she'd discovered his deception. "In that very brand of crib store, I bought Cradle and Crown, because I refuse to let you and Clarissa tarnish what should be ours," she said almost to herself. "This is our daughter's world now, and if you want to be part of it, you'll follow my lead." He replied quietly, "I understand, and I'm sorry for everything." She gave a small nod, acknowledging his words without offering absolution. Forgiveness was a process, not a one-time event. For now, their truce was a fragile one, carefully balanced on the promise of a better tomorrow for Charlotte. And so began the next chapter of their lives, one marked by 3 a.m. Feedings, diaper, changes, baby coos, and the slow rebuilding of trust in the shadow of betrayal. Whether Daniel and Sabrina would one day return to the love they once knew remained uncertain, but with Charlotte as their anchor, they faced the future, determined to give her all the love and security she deserved, forging a new kind of family in the aftermath of a very public scandal. In the end, Daniel and Sabrina's story reminds us that betrayals can happen in even the most glamorous circles. But so can strength and resilience. Sabrina bought an entire baby brand, not just to make a statement, but to secure her child's future. Daniel faced a crushing fall from grace, yet found a glimmer of hope in fatherhood. Their journey isn't a fairy tale ending, but a testament to the power of facing our darkest truths and choosing to move forward one step at a time. Thank you for joining us for this dramatic tale of betrayal, power plays, and unexpected redemption. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, share it with friends who love a good twist, and subscribe to our channel for more riveting real-life drama and fictionalized sagas. Your support keeps our community growing, so stay tuned for more stories that capture the essence of life's biggest highs and lowest lows. A man who had it all, a thriving business, a mansion in the suburbs, 2 beautiful children and a devoted wife of 15 years. From the outside, Julian Croft's life was the American dream. But behind the closed doors of their multi-million-dollar home, a nightmare was brewing. Fueled by a secret affair and a monstrous ego, he made an unthinkable choice. When his wife Clara discovered the truth, he didn't beg for forgiveness. He answered with his fists. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of a brutal betrayal and the shocking court verdict that dismantled an empire and took everything from a man who believed he was untouchable. The scent of freshly cut grass and chlorine hung in the humid afternoon air of the manicured suburb of Westport, Connecticut. From the expansive kitchen window of her colonial-style mansion, Clara Croft watched her 2 children, 12-year-old Lily and 9-year-old Sam, their laughter echoing as they splashed in the cerulean blue of the in-ground pool. Everything in the frame looked perfect, like a page torn from a luxury lifestyle magazine. The pristine white siding of the house, the meticulously landscaped gardens, the high-end stainless steel appliances that reflected her strained face. It was a beautiful picture, but the canvas was beginning to fray at the edges. Her husband, Julian Croft, was the artist behind this masterpiece of a life. A charismatic and ruthlessly ambitious real estate developer, he had built his empire Croft Holdings from the ground up. He was the man everyone admired at the country club, the one who gave the most at charity auctions, the one whose confident baritone could command any room. To the world, he was a pillar of the community. To Clara, for 15 years, he had been her everything. She had met him in college. She was studying architecture, her mind buzzing with designs and blueprints. He was in business school, his eyes already set on a future of skyscrapers and lucrative deals. He'd swept her off her feet with his grand promises and unwavering ambition. "You and me, Clara," he'd whispered to her on their 3rd date. "We're going to build an empire." And they did. But while he built his with steel and glass, she built hers within the walls of their home. She'd set aside her own career aspirations to raise their children, to host his business partners, to be the silent, supportive architect of his personal life, so he could conquer the professional one. For a long time, it was enough. But over the last year, a subtle chill had crept into their gilded cage. Julian, who once came home eager to share the day's victories, now returned late, smelling of expensive whiskey and a faint, unfamiliar perfume he always blamed on a client or a colleague. He'd stare at his phone, a slight secretive smile playing on his lips, and quickly angle it away if she walked into the room. His compliments, once warm and genuine, now felt rehearsed and hollow. The distance between them in their king-sized bed had grown into a vast, cold canyon. "Another late one tonight, honey," he'd said that morning, not even looking up from his phone as he straightened his Tom Ford tie. "Closing the big Sinclair deal. It's a monster." The Sinclair deal. He'd been talking about it for months, and he'd been talking about Amber Sinclair for just as long. My new VP of acquisitions, he'd introduced her at the company's Christmas gala. Amber was everything Clara wasn't anymore. She was in her late 20s, sharp-hungry, with a sleek blonde bob and a wardrobe of form-fitting power suits. She looked at Julian not with the comfortable love of a wife, but with the raw, undisguised admiration of a disciple. or something more. Clara had felt a prickle of unease that night, a feeling she had quickly buried under layers of denial. It was just business. Julian was a handsome, powerful man. Of course, younger women would admire him. But the late nights became more frequent. The business trips on weekends where he was suddenly unreachable for hours began to pile up. A charge on the credit card statement for a boutique hotel in the city which he'd dismissed as an accidental booking for a client. A pair of delicate diamond earrings in his briefcase that he claimed were a gift for his mother, though Clara never saw her wear them. Each discovery was a small cut, a tiny tear in the fabric of her reality. She tried to confront him once, her voice trembling as she held up the hotel receipt. Julian had simply laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. "Clara, darling, you're being hysterical. Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under? The Sinclair deal is worth over $50 million. I was winning and dining investors. Do you want this life? Do you want the house, the cars, the schools for the kids? Then let me do my job." He'd turned the tables so masterfully, making her feel small, paranoid and ungrateful. She had retreated ashamed of her suspicions. Tonight, however, was different. It was their 16th wedding anniversary. She had reminded him that morning. He'd blinked a flicker of something annoyance, forgetfulness in his eyes, before his charming mask slipped back into place. "Of course, darling. I'll be home by 7. I'll make a reservation at Per Se." It was now 9:30 p.m. The reservation had long since passed. The children were asleep. A single-place setting remained at the polished mahogany dining table beside a bottle of champagne sweating in a silver bucket. Clara sat in the silence, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, measuring out each second of her humiliation. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her friend, Maria. "Thinking of you on your anniversary. Hope Julian is spoiling you, rotten XOXO." Clara's fingers trembled as she typed a reply. Before she could, another message came through. It was an alert from the joint credit card account. American Express. A charge of $785.42 has been approved at the Gilded Lily restaurant. The Gilded Lily. A notoriously romantic, intimate restaurant in the city. A place for lovers. It wasn't Per Se. And it was a charge made just 15 minutes ago. He wasn't stuck in a late meeting. He was out dining with someone else on their anniversary. The cold dread that had been a subtle undercurrent for months now flooded her, a tidal wave of ice. This was no longer about suspicion. This was about proof. The denial she had so carefully constructed crumbled into dust. He wasn't just distant. He was living a separate life, a life she was funding but was not invited to. As she stared at the notification on her phone, the name he'd mentioned that morning echoed in her mind. The Sinclair deal. Amber Sinclair. A sudden fierce resolve hardened her features. She would not sit here and wait for him to come home smelling of lies. She stood up, her movements stiff. She walked to his home office, a room she rarely entered. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she needed something tangible. A receipt, a note. Anything to prove she wasn't going insane. His laptop was open on his desk. She stared at it, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. It was a violation of his privacy, an act of mistrust. But trust, she realized with a bitter pang, had already left the building. She touched the trackpad. The screen flickered to life. It was unlocked, and open on the screen was his personal email. The top message in the inbox made her breath catch in her throat. From Amber Sinclair. Subject. Tonight. Can't wait to have you all to myself tonight. Jay, forget the old ball and chain. The future is us. See you at our spot. All my love. A. The words blurred through her tears. Old ball and chain. That's what she was. A relic. An obstacle. The foundation upon which he built his empire, now just a nuisance to be forgotten. The confirmation didn't bring relief, only a profound, soul-crushing agony. The picture-perfect life was a lie. The gilded cage was a prison. And the man she loved was a stranger. The drive into Manhattan was a blur of streetlights and tears. Clara didn't have a plan. She was operating on pure, unadulterated adrenaline, and a pain so sharp it felt physical. The text message. The email. They were a 1-2 punch that had knocked the wind out of her, leaving her gasping for a truth she could no longer ignore. Every traffic light seemed to mock her, a glaring red symbol of the stop she should have put to her doubts months ago. She found the Gilded Lily nestled on a quiet, cobblestoned street in Soho. It was exactly as she'd imagined, discreet, elegant, with soft lighting that spilled onto the pavement, creating an aura of intimate secrets. She parked across the street, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. What was she going to do, Storm, in Make a Scene? The thought was terrifying, so contrary to her nature. She was Clara Croft, the poised wife, the calm mother. She didn't cause public disturbances, but the woman sitting in the driver's seat of the Lexus SUV was no longer just Clara Croft. She was a woman betrayed a woman whose entire world had been built on a foundation of lies. She watched the entrance for what felt like an eternity, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. And then she saw them. Julian emerged first, laughing, his arm draped possessively around Amber Sinclair's shoulders. Amber leaned into him, her blonde head resting on his chest for a moment, her face alight with a triumphant glow. She was wearing a stunning emerald green dress that clung to her body, a stark contrast to the conservative navy dress Clara wore. They looked like a power couple, radiant and untouchable. They looked like they belonged together. The sight was a dagger to Clara's heart, twisting with a brutal finality. He hailed a taxi. As he opened the door for Amber, he leaned in and kissed her a deep, passionate kiss under the soft glow of the street lamp. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was a lover's kiss full of intimacy and promise. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. This wasn't a fling. This was a relationship, a whole other life he was living without her. She followed the taxi, her mind a maelstrom of rage and grief. Her thoughts raced. Were they going back to his office, to a hotel? The taxi didn't head for the highway back to Westport. Instead, it pulled up in front of a sleek, modern apartment building in Tribeca, one she didn't recognize. She watched as Julian paid the driver, and they disappeared inside his arm, still firmly around Amber's waist. Clara sat in her car for a long time. The silence of the vehicle, a stark contrast to the screaming in her head. She knew with a sickening certainty that this was their place. The monster deal wasn't just business. It was the construction of a new life with a new woman. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was replacing her. The drive home was slow and deliberate. The tears were gone, replaced by an icy resolve. The hurt was still there, a gaping wound in her chest, but it was now surrounded by a cold, hard anger. When she walked back into the silent, cavernous house, it no longer felt like a home. It felt like a stage, a set for a play, in which she had been unknowingly playing the fool. Julian arrived home just after 2 a.m. He tried to be quiet, but the heavy front door clicked shut with a definitive thud. Clara was waiting for him in the dimly lit living room, sitting in one of the oversized armchairs. She hadn't changed. The single glass of untouched champagne still sat on the table beside her. He froze when he saw her, the charming mask momentarily slipping. "Clara, you're still up." "Happy anniversary, Julian," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his practiced apology already forming on his lips. "Honey, I am so sorry. The Sinclair deal, it went into extra innings. We had to wine and dine the Japanese investors. They're notoriously difficult. I completely lost track of time. My phone died. I feel terrible." The lies were so effortless, so smooth. A year ago, she would have believed him. She would have felt a pang of guilt for doubting him. Now she just felt pity. Pity for him and for the fool she had been. She stood up slowly. "The Gilded Lily," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Is that where the Japanese investors like to dine?" Julian's face went pale. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving his handsome features looking suddenly gaunt under the dim light. What? What are you talking about?" "The credit card alert, Julian, for $785. At a table for two, I presume." She took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. "And the apartment in Tribeca, is that where you hold your late-night business meetings? Two." He was cornered. For the first time in their marriage, she saw genuine panic in his eyes. His bluster deflated, replaced by a desperate scramble for a new lie. "Clara, you're not making any sense. You must be mistaken. You've been under a lot of stress." "Don't you dare!" she whispered, her voice trembling with repressed fury. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me again. I saw you, Julian. I saw you and Amber." The mention of Amber's name changed everything. The panic in his eyes hardened into something else, something cold and cruel. His posture shifted from defensive to aggressive. The mask was off. "So what if you did?" he sneered, his voice dropping to a low growl. "What were you doing, following me, spying on me? You're pathetic." The insult struck her, but she held her ground. "I am your wife. We have a family. We have a life. Or at least I thought we did." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "A life? This isn't a life, Clara. It's a performance. You, the perfect housewife in her perfect mansion. Me, the provider. It's been a bore for years." He took a step towards her, his presence suddenly menacing. "Amber. Amber understands me. She's smart. She's ambitious. She sees me for who I am, not just as a walking checkbook." Each word was a deliberate cruelty, designed to wound. He was dismantling their 15 years together, piece by piece, right in front of her. "I gave up my career for you," she said, her voice breaking. "I built this home. I raised your children. And you've been well compensated for it." He shot back, his eyes glinting with malice. "Don't pretend you're a martyr. You love this house, you love money, you just don't want to share it." The argument escalated, their voices rising in the cavernous room. It was a torrent of every unspoken resentment, every buried frustration from the past few years. Clara accused him of betrayal, of lies, of disrespect. He in turn painted her as a clinging, ungrateful, paranoid woman who was holding him back. He was rewriting their entire history, casting himself as the victim, the man trapped in a gilded cage with a boring wife. Then Clara said the words that would prove to be the final irrevocable turning point. "I want you to leave," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Or I will. I'll take the children, and I will leave. We're done, Julian." His face contorted with rage. You'll do nothing, he seethed. This is my house. These are my children. You have nothing. You are nothing without me. They're my children too, and I will not have them raised by a liar and a cheat. That was when he lunged, but it was what he said next, his voice a venomous hiss that would haunt her forever. Amber was right. You're a leech. You need to be taught a lesson. The mention of Amber's name was the spark that ignited the inferno. It was one thing for Julian to be cruel, but to use his mistress's words as a weapon against his wife in their home, it was a desecration. It confirmed for Clara that this wasn't just Julian's decision. It was a shared cruelty, a verdict they had passed on her together. She said that... Clara's voice was barely a whisper, the fight draining out of her replaced by a hollow shock. Julian's face was a mask of pure fury. He saw her shock not as a sign of pain, but as a weakness to be exploited. She sees you for what you are, Clara. A dead weight I've been dragging around for years. She told me I needed to cut you loose, and she was right. He was closing the space between them now, his large frame seeming to suck all the air out of the room. Clara instinctively took a step back, her hand flying to her throat. This was a side of Julian she had never seen. The charming veneer had been stripped away, revealing something ugly and violent beneath. "Get out, Julian." She repeated, her voice stronger this time, fueled by a primal mix of fear and defiance. "I mean it. Get out of this house now." "This is my house," he roared, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. "Everything you have is because of me." He was inches from her now, his finger jabbing at her chest. "You are not going to ruin my life because you're feeling a little insecure." "My insecurity?" she cried, shoving his hand away. "You're the one living a double life. You're the one destroying this family for a cheap affair." The moment the words cheap affair left her lips, something snapped in his eyes. His face, which had been red with anger, turned deathly pale. His rage became something colder, more focused. "Don't you dare talk about her that way," he hissed. He grabbed her by the upper arms, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons. The strength in his grip was terrifying. Clara cried out, a mix of surprise and pain. "Let go of me, Julian. You're hurting me." "You want to know what hurt is?" He snarled, his face contorted. "Hurt is being trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who hasn't had an original thought in a decade. Hurt is having to pretend to care about PTA meetings and garden parties while my life is passing me by." He shoved her backward. Clara stumbled, her heel catching on the edge of the expensive Persian rug. She fell hard, her head cracking against the sharp corner of the marble coffee table. A blinding, white-hot pain exploded behind her eyes. For a moment, the world went black. Stars bursting in her vision. Dazed, she lay on the floor, the room spinning around her. She could taste blood in her mouth. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard him standing over her. She expected to hear concern, maybe even panic at what he'd done. Instead, what she heard chilled her to the bone. "See," he said, his voice laced with a terrifying calm. "This is what happens when you push me. This is what you get." He wasn't sorry. He was justifying it. Clara pushed herself up onto her elbows, her vision slowly clearing. Her head throbbed with a nauseating rhythm. She touched her fingers to the back of her head, and they came away wet and sticky with blood. The sight of it, dark red against her pale skin, jolted her out of her daze. He had hurt her. He had physically, violently hurt her. For his mistress. "You hit me." She breathed the words, heavy with disbelief. "You fell," he corrected coldly. You were hysterical, and you tripped. That's what happened. That's the story. He was already creating the narrative the next in a long line of lies. He wasn't her husband anymore. He was her adversary. He was a threat. The thought of her children asleep upstairs, oblivious to the monster their father had become, sent a jolt of pure protective terror through her. She had to get them out. She had to get them away from him. Scrambling to her feet, ignoring the dizzying pain in her head, she made a run for the grand staircase. Stay away from me. Stay away from us. He was faster. He caught her at the base of the stairs, grabbing a fistful of her hair and yanking her back with such force that she screamed. The pain was sharp and searing. You are not going anywhere. He bellowed, his face inches from hers, his breath hot and sour with whiskey. You're not taking my children. You're not taking my money. You will stay here, and you will play the part of the loving wife, or I swear to God, Clara, I will make your life a living hell. It was in that moment, with his hand twisted in her hair and his eyes filled with a hatred she never thought possible, that the love she once had for him died completely. It wasn't a slow fade. It was an instantaneous, violent death extinguished by his brutality. In its place, something new was born, a steely, unyielding resolve. With a surge of adrenaline she didn't know she possessed, she drove her elbow back into his gut. He grunted, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. She wrenched herself free, stumbling up the first few stairs. He lunged for her again, but this time she was ready. She turned and kicked out her heel, connecting squarely with his chest. It wasn't a powerful blow, but it was enough to make him stagger backward. Don't touch me again, she said, her voice low and shaking with a fury she'd never felt before. He stared at her, breathing heavily, more surprised than hurt. He saw the look in her eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by something he didn't recognize. Something that wasn't going to break. He straightened his shirt, his composure slowly returning. A cruel, calculating smirk spread across his face. Fine, he said smoothly. Have it your way. But you're making a very, very big mistake. You have no idea who you're dealing with. He turned and walked calmly to the front door. I'll be at the club, he said over his shoulder. When you've had time to cool down and see reason, we can talk. But this conversation is over. The door clicked shut, leaving Clara alone in the echoing silence of the foyer. She stood trembling on the stairs, her hand flying to her throbbing head, her scalp aching where he had pulled her hair. The magnificent house, her gilded cage, now felt like a crime scene. She looked at her reflection in the large, ornate mirror on the wall. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. A thin trickle of blood ran from her hairline, down her temple. She saw the bruises already beginning to form on her arms where he'd grabbed her. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was a victim, and she had the evidence to prove it. Ignoring the pain, she walked on unsteady legs to the kitchen, grabbed a handful of ice, and wrapped it in a dish towel, pressing it to her head. Then she walked back to the living room and took out her phone. Her first instinct was to call the police, but Julian's parting threat echoed in her ears. You have no idea who you're dealing with. He was powerful. He had connections. He would twist the story. He'd already told her what the story would be. She was hysterical. She fell. No. She needed a different kind of help. She took several clear, unflinching photos of her injuries, the cut on her head, the angry red marks on her arms, the developing bruise on her cheekbone where her face had hit the table. She time-stamped them. Then she scrolled through her contacts, her finger hovering over a name she hadn't needed in years, but one she had kept for a reason she never wanted to admit to herself. Her college friend, Eleanor Vance. Now one of the most feared and respected divorce attorneys in the state of New York. She pressed the call button. When Eleanor's sleepy voice answered, Clara's broke. "Ellie," she sobbed, the dam of her composure finally breaking. "It's Clara. I need your help. Julian. He hurt me." The next few hours were a blur of calculated, terrified action. On Eleanor's stark instructions over the phone, Clara did not wash the blood from her hair. She did not change her clothes. "Go to the emergency room in Stamford, not Westport," Eleanor commanded, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through Clara's panic. "Tell them exactly what happened. Use the word assaulted. Get a full medical report. Then pack a go-bag for you and the children. Only essentials. Passports, birth certificates, a few changes of clothes. Meet me at my office at 8 a.m. sharp. Do not go back to the house." Waking Lily and Sam was the hardest part. She gently shook them awake, her heart aching at their sleepy, confused faces. "We're going on a little adventure, sweethearts," she whispered, forcing a smile that felt like cracking glass. She helped them pack their favorite toys and books into their backpacks, her movements frantic but quiet. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. She expected Julian to walk back through the door at any moment. By 4 a.m., they were gone. Clara drove away from the mansion that had been her entire world for 15 years, not even daring to look at it in the rear-view mirror. The trip to the ER was humiliating. The nurses were kind, but the questions were clinical and sharp. The doctor documented every bruise, every cut, his expression grim. They gave her a pamphlet on domestic violence shelters. It all felt surreal, like she was watching a movie about someone else's life. Eleanor Vance's office was a sleek, minimalist space in a downtown skyscraper, a world away from the chintz and comfort of Westport. Eleanor, or Ellie, as Clara had known her, was no longer the free-spirited art history major from college. She was a woman clad in a steel-grey power suit, her gaze intense, her presence formidable. She hugged Clara tightly, then immediately switched into professional mode. "Okay, Clara, let's get to work," she said, leading her to a conference room. "The medical report is crucial. Your photos are excellent. We filed for an emergency protective order this morning. He will be legally barred from the house and from contacting you or the children." Julian was served the papers at his office that afternoon. The explosion was immediate. Clara's phone, which she had been advised by Eleanor to keep on but not answer, lit up with a furious barrage of calls and texts. "Julian, what the hell is this? Are you insane? Julian, you can't keep me from my own children. I will destroy you for this, Clara. Julian, call me back now. You are making the biggest mistake of your life." Then came the calls from his lawyer, a notoriously aggressive attorney named Marcus Thorne. He left a chillingly polite voicemail for Eleanor, which she played for Clara on speakerphone. "Ms. Vance," Thorne's smooth voice began, "my client, Mr. Croft, is deeply concerned for his wife's mental stability. He informs me she had a hysterical episode last night, tripped and hit her head. Her accusations are slanderous and are clearly a ploy for a larger settlement in a divorce she seems intent on pursuing. We are prepared to fight this with every resource at our disposal." "He's already spinning it," Clara said, her voice shaking. "Of course he is," Eleanor said calmly, her eyes like chips of flint. "This is what men like Julian Croft do. They control the narrative. Our job is to take that control away from him, and we do that with facts, not emotion." The first battle began immediately. Julian, through his lawyer, filed a motion to have the protective order thrown out, submitting affidavits from friends and business partners attesting to his gentle nature and Clara's recent emotional volatility. Simultaneously, he cut her off financially. Every joint credit card was declined. The debit card for their shared account was frozen. Suddenly, Clara, a woman who had never had to look at a price tag, couldn't even buy her children a happy meal. Eleanor had anticipated this. She had a fund set aside for clients in exactly this situation. She put Clara and the children up in a secure extended-stay hotel and gave her a prepaid credit card for immediate expenses. "He thinks he can starve you out," Eleanor explained, her expression grim. "He wants you desperate and crawling back to him, willing to accept whatever scraps he throws your way. We are going to show him how badly he has underestimated you." The next 2 weeks were a grueling introduction to Clara's new reality. Life was a series of meetings with lawyers, forensic accountants, and child psychologists. The children were confused and scared. Lily was old enough to sense the tension and asked difficult questions Clara struggled to answer. Sam had started having nightmares. The secure but sterile hotel suite felt a world away from their sprawling home and backyard. Julian, meanwhile, launched a campaign of psychological warfare. He used their mutual friends to get messages to her, painting himself as the heartbroken husband worried about his unstable wife. He sent lavish gifts for the children to the hotel, along with notes saying how much their daddy missed them, a move Eleanor identified as a clear attempt to manipulate the kids and guilt-trip Clara. But Julian's arrogance was his Achilles heel. He believed he was invincible, that his money and influence made him untouchable. He refused every settlement offer Eleanor put on the table, convinced he could crush Clara in court. "He wants to go to war, Ellie," Clara said one evening, exhausted after another 10-hour day of depositions. "He wants to humiliate me." "Let him," Eleanor replied with a thin smile. "Arrogant men make mistakes, and while he's busy trying to prove you're an unfit mother, my team is doing a deep dive into something he values more than his children, his money." The forensic accounting team Eleanor had hired was led by a quiet, meticulous man named David Brown. He spent weeks combing through thousands of pages of financial documents from Croft Holdings. At first, everything seemed to be in order. Julian's company was on the surface a massive success, valued at over $100 million. But David Brown was looking for the things Julian didn't want anyone to see. He cross-referenced LLCs, followed money into offshore accounts, and analyzed investment patterns. One evening, he called Eleanor with a tremor of excitement in his voice. "I think I've found something," he said. "It's a series of wire transfers, very cleverly hidden. Large sums of money moving from Croft Holdings into a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. The name of the corporation is AS Enterprises." "A.S.," Eleanor repeated slowly. "Amber Sinclair." "That's what I thought," David confirmed. "It looks like he's been systematically siphoning millions of dollars out of the marital asset pool and hiding it. But it gets worse. I've been looking at the projections for his latest development, the big Sinclair deal he's so proud of. The numbers are creative. He's leveraged the company to the hilt to fund this thing. He's counting on a massive payday. But if anything goes wrong, a shift in the market, a delay in construction, the whole house of cards could come crashing down." Eleanor hung up the phone, a predatory gleam in her eye. Julian wasn't just a cheater and an abuser. He was a fraud. He was trying to hide assets from his wife while simultaneously gambling the entire family's fortune on a risky venture, likely at the urging of his new partner. "Clara," Eleanor said, turning to her client. "We need to talk. I think we just found the key to dismantling Julian Croft's entire empire." The first battle had been about survival. The next one would be about justice. The discovery of AS Enterprises shifted the entire landscape of the case. It was no longer just a contentious divorce. It was a potential case of large-scale financial fraud. Eleanor Vance knew that in a high-stakes divorce, the person who controls the financial narrative often wins. Julian had tried to paint Clara as a gold digger, but Eleanor was about to paint him as a thief. The forensic accountant, David Brown, delved deeper. He worked tirelessly, his team tracing the flow of money like digital bloodhounds. They discovered that AS Enterprises wasn't just a holding company. It had made significant investments. It had purchased a multi-million-dollar apartment in Tribeca, the one Clara had seen them enter, and a portfolio of luxury goods, a new Porsche expensive jewelry designer clothes. All of it paid for with money funneled from Croft Holdings, money that was legally half Clara's. He wasn't just having an affair, Eleanor explained to a stunned Clara. He was building a new life for Amber with your money. He was systematically liquidating your shared future to fund his. The betrayal cut deeper than Clara could have imagined. It wasn't just infidelity. It was calculated, cold-blooded theft. While she was managing their home and raising their children, he had been meticulously stealing from them. But David Brown found something even more damning. Julian's monster Sinclair deal was a ticking time bomb. He had secured massive loans based on inflated property value projections and fraudulent occupancy commitments. It was a classic developer's gamble, but on a colossal scale. He had essentially mortgaged the entire company on this one project. "He's in a precarious position," David summarized. "He needs this project to succeed, or he's facing total financial ruin and possibly even criminal charges for bank fraud. He is desperate." This desperation explained his aggression, his refusal to settle. He couldn't afford to give Clara a fair share of the company, because in reality the company's value was a fiction. He needed every penny to keep his house of cards from collapsing. Eleanor knew they needed more than just financial records. They needed a human element, someone from the inside. "Who did he fire recently?" Eleanor asked Clara one afternoon. "Think back over the last year. Any senior people let go suddenly?" Clara thought for a moment. "There was Robert Aiken," she recalled. "He was the chief financial officer for almost a decade, a very by-the-book, cautious man. Julian replaced him about 8 months ago. He said Robert was too conservative for the company's new aggressive growth phase. He promoted someone younger." "Who did he promote?" Eleanor asked, her pen poised over her legal pad. "I think his name was Greg Milner. Julian liked him because he was a yes man." Eleanor's team immediately went to work trying to find Robert Aiken. They located him in Florida, where he'd taken an early retirement. At first, he was reluctant to speak, bound by a non-disclosure agreement and a hefty severance package. But Eleanor was persuasive. She explained that she wasn't interested in his breach of the NDA, but in potential criminal fraud he might have been pressured to overlook it. She flew down to meet him in person. Over coffee, in a quiet Tampa cafe, Robert Aiken, a man with a tired face and honest eyes, finally opened up. "Julian Croft is a brilliant salesman." Robert began stirring his coffee. "He can sell sand in the desert. But his ethics, they became flexible. It all started when Amber Sinclair came on board. She was ambitious and she fed his ego. She convinced him he was a visionary, that traditional risk assessment was for lesser men." Robert detailed how Amber and Julian had cooked up the Sinclair deal. He had warned Julian repeatedly that the financial models were reckless, that they were misleading investors and the banks. I told him it was fraud, plain and simple. Robert said, his voice low. I refused to sign off on the loan documents, so he offered me a generous package to retire and replaced me with Greg Milner, who would sign anything Julian put in front of him. I took the money because I have a family to support, and I knew Julian would ruin my reputation if I went public. He would have painted me as a disgruntled employee. Robert Aiken was their star witness. He could testify to the company's true financial state and Julian's fraudulent activities. He even had copies of his original undoctored financial models for the Sinclair project, which he had saved on a personal hard drive as an insurance policy. While the financial case was building, Eleanor didn't neglect the domestic abuse charge. Julian's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, was working hard to discredit Clara, preparing to argue that her injuries were self-inflicted in a desperate grab for money. They will try to tear you apart on the stand, Clara, Eleanor warned her. They will bring up every argument you ever had, every time you were emotional. They will try to paint you as unstable. Clara felt a knot of fear in her stomach. But he assaulted me. I have the medical report. And they will say you are a liar. It will be your word against his. Julian Croft, the beloved community leader, versus the hysterical housewife. In court, it's about what you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Clara's face fell. It seemed so unfair. Just as despair began to set in, she remembered something. It was a small detail, something she hadn't thought was important. The living room, she said slowly. A few months ago, Julian installed a new smart home. You know, voice-activated controls for the lights, music, security. He loved showing it off. Eleanor sat bolt upright. What's the brand name of the system? Clara told her. Eleanor immediately got on the phone with a tech expert. These devices, the expert explained, they're always listening for a wake word, but they also store short, temporary audio buffers, and sometimes during a significant auditory event like a loud crash or a scream, the device can be triggered to save a recording to the cloud. The chance was slim, but it was a chance. Eleanor's team drafted a subpoena for the tech company, demanding any and all audio files recorded in the Croft residence on the night of the assault. Julian's lawyers fought it ferociously, citing privacy concerns, but the judge, intrigued by the possibility, granted the request. Weeks went by. The trial date loomed. Clara was a nervous wreck preparing for the character assassination she knew was coming. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, Eleanor called her. "We got it, Clara," Eleanor said, her voice tight with excitement. "The company sent the file. It's 37 seconds long. I'm sending it to you now. Brace yourself." Clara's hands trembled as she opened the email and downloaded the audio file. She put her phone to her ear and pressed play. The quality was slightly muffled, but it was undeniably clear. It began with the sound of her own voice, strained and high-pitched, destroying this family for a cheap affair. Then Julian's voice, low and menacing. "Don't you dare talk about her that way." There was the sound of a scuffle, her own pained cry. "Let go of me, Julian. You're hurting me." And then his voice dripping with venom. "You want to know what hurt is? Hurt is being trapped in a loveless marriage." The recording continued, capturing the sickening thud of her head hitting the table, followed by a moment of silence, and then Julian's chilling, damning words. "See, this is what happens when you push me. This is what you get." It was all there. His rage, his violence, and most importantly, his own admission, his justification of the act. He hadn't said, "Did you fall?" He had said, "This is what happens when you push me." It was proof, irrefutable, undeniable proof. Clara sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. They weren't tears of sadness this time. They were tears of relief. Julian Croft, the master of the narrative, had no idea that his own beloved gadget had been recording the truth. His own arrogance had once again become his greatest enemy. The courtroom was Julian Croft's new stage, and he played the part of the wronged husband to perfection. Dressed in a somber, bespoke suit, he sat beside his lawyer, Marcus Thorne, his face a carefully constructed mask of concern. He cast sorrowful glances toward Clara, a performance for the judge who would decide his fate. Across the aisle, Clara sat beside Eleanor Vance, a silent statue of resolve, her hands clasped to still their trembling. The trial began with a brutal, calculated assault on Clara's character. Marcus Thorne, a master of courtroom theatre, called witnesses who painted Clara as emotional and erratic. He twisted her fear of Julian's affair into a narrative of obsession and paranoia. When Clara took the stand, Thorne's cross-examination was a masterclass in insinuation. "Mrs. Croft," he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Isn't it true you were terrified of losing the luxurious lifestyle your husband provided? Isn't it true that when you discovered he had a new successful colleague, you became hysterical and followed him fabricating this story of abuse to secure a larger settlement?" Through it all, Clara held her ground, her voice steady. "I was terrified of the man who was lying to me and hurting me," she stated, simply refusing to let Thorne rattle her, but she could feel the doubt he was planting in the air. Soon it was Julian's turn to testify. He strode to the witness box with an air of confidence, flashing a reassuring smile at the judge. He recounted his version of their anniversary night with polished ease. "Clara was hysterical," he said, his voice laced with regret. "She was making wild accusations. She lost her footing and tragically she fell. It was a terrible accident. I would never ever lay a hand on my wife." Eleanor Vance began her cross-examination, her questions like surgical incisions. She first dismantled his financial empire. She produced the wire transfers to AS Enterprises, the shell company named for Amber Sinclair. "Mr. Croft, you used this company to funnel over $4 million of marital assets to purchase an apartment and a Porsche for your mistress, did you not?" Julian sputtered, his composure cracking. "It's a legitimate corporate entity." Then Eleanor called Robert Aiken, the former CFO. Aiken calmly and methodically exposed the truth of Croft Holdings. He testified that the company was leveraged to the hilt, propped up by fraudulent loan applications for the Sinclair deal, a project he called a catastrophe waiting to happen. Julian's face turned ashen as the image of his untouchable empire was revealed to be a house of cards. But Eleanor saved her final devastating blow for the assault itself. "Your Honor," she announced, "the plaintiff would like to introduce one final piece of evidence." A court officer placed a speaker on the table. Julian watched a knot of confusion and fear tightening in his chest. "Mr. Croft," Eleanor said, her voice sharp, "you testified under oath that your wife's injury was an accident, that she fell. Is that correct?" "That is the absolute truth," Julian declared, his voice a shade too loud. "Then perhaps you can explain this," Eleanor said, and pressed play. The courtroom fell silent, filled only by the tinny audio from the smart home device. First came Clara's voice, "Destroying this family for a cheap affair." Then Julian's menacing reply, the sounds of a scuffle, and Clara's pained cry. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was locked on Julian Croft as his face contorted in a mask of pure horror. He looked like a man watching his own execution. A sickening thud echoed from the speaker, followed by a collective gasp from the gallery. And finally Julian's own voice, clear as day, dripping with cold justification. "See? This is what happens when you push me. This is what you get." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus Thorne dropped his head into his hands. Julian stared at the speaker as if it were a venomous snake, his mouth agape. He had been exposed not by a witness, but by his own voice, his own words, his own monstrous truth. Eleanor let the silence hang in the air before delivering the final blow. "Mr. Croft," she said quietly but with immense power, "this is what happens when you push me. Those are not the words of a man witnessing an accident. They are the words of an abuser." The verdict delivered 2 days later was an annihilation. Judge Miller, looking down from the bench, found Julian Croft guilty of assault. She referred him to the district attorney's office for perjury. The protective order was made permanent. On the division of assets, the judgment was even more ruinous. Citing Julian's egregious financial misconduct in attempting to hide millions with his mistress, the judge awarded Clara 100% of the value of those stolen funds. The apartment, the car, the jewelry. It was all hers. She was then awarded 70% of the remaining marital assets, which, thanks to Robert Aiken's testimony, was now understood to be 70% of a bankrupt, debt-ridden company. Clara was granted sole legal and physical custody of their children. Julian was permitted supervised visitation twice a month, but only after completing a year-long batterer's intervention program. His child support and alimony payments were based on his former 9-figure income, a crippling sum he now had no way to earn. As a final indignity, the judge awarded Clara exclusive use of the Westport mansion, giving Julian 48 hours to remove his personal belongings under court supervision. As the verdict was read, Julian sat frozen. The color drained from his face. His amour, his reputation, his family, all gone. In the gallery, he saw Amber Sinclair slip out of the door, abandoning the sinking ship, without a backward glance. He had lost everything for a woman who was now running from the wreckage. The aftermath was a swift and total collapse. Croft Holdings filed for bankruptcy. The media savaged him. He became a social pariah. A cautionary tale whispered at the country clubs he could no longer afford. Clara, guided by Eleanor, made no attempt to salvage Julian's toxic legacy. She sold the cavernous mansion and its haunting memories. She sold the Tribeca apartment and the Porsche. After her legal fees were paid, she was left with a comfortable but modest nest egg. She bought a smaller, light-filled house in a new town, a place with no ghosts. She enrolled Lily and Sam in the local school and started taking architecture classes again, rediscovering the part of herself she had sacrificed for Julian. Her life was no longer one of extreme luxury, but it was filled with peace and purpose. It was real. A year later, while gardening in her new backyard, she received a postcard from Florida. It was from Robert Aiken. "Clara," it read, "what you did took incredible courage. Thank you." She held the note to her chest and smiled. The gilded cage had been demolished. She had lost a fortune, but in exchange, she had won back her freedom, her future, and herself. She was no longer Julian Croft's wife. She was just Clara, and for the first time in a very long time, she was truly home. Clara's story is a powerful testament to the fact that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light. It's a chilling reminder that the most polished facades can hide the darkest secrets. Julian Croft believed his money and power made him invincible. But he forgot that character is the one asset you can't buy, and the easiest one to lose. He beat his wife for his mistress, and in the end, the scales of justice didn't just balance, they tipped so far, they crushed the very foundations of his world. This story is about more than just a verdict. It's about the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the courage it takes to walk away from a beautiful lie to build a true life. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if you believe in the power of justice, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear a story of strength and survival. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that matter. What part of Clara's journey resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.